In January 2024, I started getting a lot of weird AI-generated videos of Costco guys with agonizing sounds on TikTok. I didn't think much of it and moved on. However, as I got more and more of such videos on my For You page, I started noticing something that all of the videos had in common. They all featured some Skeletrix island mentioned in the hashtags or descriptions. This definitely made me more interested, so I naturally started digging deeper and deeper into this topic. This is how I found Edward Skeletrix, the guy behind all of this madness, an elusive artist whose weird, mysterious image only creates more interest around himself. As time progressed, I listened to more of his stuff and followed his activity on the internet. However, even a year after finding out who he is, it is still hard to tell what exactly makes him so special. Or is it? After the release of his 2025 album, Museum Music, I think I'm confident enough to say that I have found out a reason behind Edward's success, at least partially. However, let's first take a look at his background. Edward King Bass IV is the government name of rapper, producer, designer, and AI artist, more known as Edward Skeletrix. Not much is known about Edward. We know he was born in 1998, he attended Georgia State University studying psychology, and now he's based in New York, being closely associated with Brennan Jones. He began his journey as a musician around 2013, first under the name Sight. During this time, he has released a now beloved amongst his fans mixtape, Architecture, and has gained recognition for producing tracks for the likes of XXXTentacion or Night Level, who now have become much bigger artists than him. During this time, he had also made a song which ended up on Geometry Dash, but that's about it. In 2019, he starts his experimental fashion brand, Sickly, which has operated until 2022 and is now unfortunately shut down. The same year as starting Sickly, Edward began his work under his current name. There's not much material from before 2023 as he has removed a lot of his music from streaming services, but in 2023, Edward has released his biggest song to date, Z06 Get Out, as well as his debut project under the new name, Skeletrix Language. And I think it's pretty good. Ranked as one of the best rage projects on Rate Your Music, Skeletrix Language essentially presents the early version of museum music. Chaotic, experimental, and psychotic is how I would describe the project. It has certain gems like Typical Rap Song 1 or Typical Rap Song 2, which have some of the best beats in Edward's catalog, up to date. However, the things that stand out to me the most are not something I'd necessarily call strengths, but rather peculiarities. Firstly, Skeletrix Language presents the Skeletrix Island and Typical Rap Song series, which I will cover in more detail later, as well as such songs as Typical Rap Song 10, which contain 8 minutes of silence, or Rapper FWSS24, bruh, which is a parody of Cardi's Teen X. However, the album went seemingly under the radar for most people, even though it is a great listen. Then, through 2024, Edward has released a couple of singles. What is interesting is that during that time, Edward has seemingly started a rebranding of himself. He has started promoting his new project, Skeletrix Radio, created the Laylo, and an entire ARG, and a series of photography as a PR campaign for this project. And he has released some of his best singles to date during that time. Usuria, Fun, and Love You are all great songs, which all share a certain style which is different from the Skeletrix Language or Museum Music stuff. He has also removed many tracks off streaming and started releasing new music under the name I Am a Monster in that period. Unfortunately, the album has been scrapped, but I believe it led Edward to releasing Museum Music. Speaking of, I believe that Museum Music is a centerpiece of figuring out what makes Edward so special. And to do that, I'd like to start off by introducing a different character. Remember Dean Blunt? If you first heard about him in 2024, it's the guy who made that one album all of the obnoxious people with Aphex Twin and E in their names put on the profile picture. Or the Dean Blunt, if you have heard of him before. Wait, who is he again? Mostly known as a musician, Dean Blunt stands out of the conventional image of a musical artist. Dean is a 40-year-old London-based artist known for his music with Babyfather and Hype Williams, or his solo music by the original name. Releasing over 15 musical projects over the last 15 years has helped him to become a known figure in the musical world. However, it is wrong to think of him only as a musician, directing music videos, making art exhibitions, or even writing books. This dude has done it all, and that makes me think that Dean Blunt is a very good example of a persona inspiring not only casual listeners and music consumers, but more importantly, the artists themselves. In every generation, there is somebody like that. Some artists whose presence alone can inspire people. I mean, think about it. He, until the recent times, never had any extra popular songs, barely performed on stage, or even appeared publicly. Such an elusive figure would never be profitable for a label or any entity that makes profit of him. This is also what unites Dean and Edward's Skeletrix. I think it is pretty obvious that you can make a parallel between the two. Both bend the norms of musical genres they perform in, both step away from just being musical artists by making exhibitions, directing music videos, making performative art, and experimenting with other forms. Both are pretty mysterious, and you can kinda say that they both criticize art.
I don't really like much to do with the music currently, music scene. I think it's pile of trash. Not I don't like music, I just don't like the music industry now, or how it works, or the so-called underground that doesn't really exist. So I don't really like to be involved in it in any way. It's almost like when you finish work and you don't want to speak to the people in the office after you clock out. It's kind of how I feel about music.
Listen to the album. Nah, I don't really listen to albums.
Oh yeah, no problem.
I mean, even their music videos are super non-conventional, which enforces their groundbreaking image. However, it seems like the two share one thing, which is arguably even more important. What I'm referring to is influence. Dean is notable for working and influencing a variety of artists, such as A$AP Rocky, Young Lean, and even Steve Lacy throughout his career. And although Edward is obviously not on Dean's level, his attempts at promoting his art have already shown that he's capable of setting trends, as his creepy AI stuff has been picked up by many people on TikTok. Such creativity and media success naturally begs the question, can he, just like Dean Blunt did in his time, become a locomotive of creative ideas for the generations of artists to come? All I can say is that only time can tell. But with the release of museum music, Ed is really pushing the agenda that he is probably one of the most creative minds in hip-hop right now. Wait, but what exactly makes him stand out? First announced in July 2024, the rollout for museum music started off with Edward posting videos of different people counting down till the release of the album. The cameos contained some of the most unexpected guests, like he got fake Peter Griffin, one of the Island Boys, Chris Hansen, and LaVar fucking Ball. I might swerve in that corner, whoa, whoa, whoa. All of them promoting his music. Brennan Jones also did it. In Chinese! Nate didn't even understand what he said. After that, Edward started selling his own custom iPods as a collaboration with No Logan. Even Unk promoted that. The iPod includes all of the music Edward has released up until this point, as well as some unique footage of him saved in the files. And an Edward Skeletrix app, which I don't know much about besides the fact that it has Hubert in it. And last, but certainly not least, the Rollout features an exhibition. Held in Manhattan, the exhibition serves as one of the most creative instances of performative art in recent years. It had a bunch of random stuff like the infamous iPod, available for anybody to try, art objects from Jack's Zebra, Brennan Jones, and even Joey, who took a napkin and wrote that this is his contribution to the exhibition. But most importantly, the main part of the exhibition is Edward himself, trapped in a glass box, covered by his coat from the Blurry Picture music video. Edward sat down on a chair for the entire exhibition. Midway through it, some woman came to the exhibition, wrote PETA on a giant Hubert Skeletrix poster near Edward, started chanting that she won't leave until Edward pays for what he did, and eventually also got put into a glass box. However, unlike her, Edward did not just sit there peacefully. His box had holes in it, allowing anyone to touch Edward either with their hands or nearby objects such as hockey sticks or ping pong balls. This interactive approach, like any performance of such kind, led to people harassing Edward, at first pouring water on him and later even trying to set him on fire, which led to the exhibition getting ended earlier. The PETA activist is obviously an actor, but Edward's part seems more interesting to me. It reminds me of the famous performance by Marina Abramovich, Rhythm Zero. I won't get into much detail as it is a very disturbing case, but essentially the performance featured Abramovich standing still while the audience was invited to do to her whatever they wanted, using one of the 72 objects she had placed on the table, such as honey, perfume, bread, and a gun, which obviously didn't end well. She's alive, don't worry. I think that in the case of Edward, this is also some form of commentary. I view this as Edward's way of expressing that people nowadays do not see artists as people, but rather as objects whose needs and rights can be neglected due to their fame. It shows that people following their favorite celebrities do not treat them as humans, even if they acknowledge that it is wrong. I see it as a critique on the culture of idols and celebrities, and erasing the audience-artist barrier serves not only as a way of making social commentary, but also as a very out-of-the-box way to promote yourself, not only as a musician, but as an artist and a persona. In the case of the Rollout or his other attempts of self-promotion like the AI videos, it shows that he really does put effort into everything he does, especially compared to the rest of the underground rappers of the last few years. Well, even accounting for the mainstream artist's Rollout. This one, at least to me, stands out as one of the most creative ones I've seen in the recent years, and it proves my point that Edward has potential. Not only does he effectively promote his music, but he makes the exhibition and artwork itself. And while the album and the exhibition are connected, the lyrical and thematic contents of each differ. While the exhibition serves as a social commentary, the album adjusts its focus and explores the themes more personal to Edward. The album's lyrics explore such things as Edward's mental health on songs like Skeletrix Island and his drug abuse on songs like Drug Story. But I don't think that the lyrical content is the album's strongest feature. But then, what is so interesting about the album? The first unique feature of this thing is that it's split in two. One released on the I Am a Monster account, another on the official one. From now on, I will refer to this one as the first one and this one as the second one. This is cool because, well, two albums, yeah, and also because this allows the album to be listened in a different order. And by playlist posted on Ed's Spotify, it seems like it was meant to be listened starting off the second one, as this way congratulations from second one leads to the congratulations to the first one. However, I think most people listen to them in the opposite order, and I don't really think it is important. It is not a storytelling album, and in this album's case, it is so chaotic in every form that the lack of order kind of works in its favor. This way, due to the album's versatility, you don't get tired of it. However, I do have to mention that the second one is definitely worse. And I really think that I should mostly focus on the first one. So before I do that, let me recall the best and the worst features of the second one. First, compared to the first one, it feels bloated and often like a bunch of throwaways. Nevertheless, this doesn't mean that it lacks creativity or quality. I would say that Garde and 667 are some of the best songs across the two. Garde is an insanely hard snippet, which was long awaited by the fan base, including me. And 667 sounds like bro is going to heaven. The sound of it reflects Edward's career and progresses up until this point. It reminds me of Peggy's Dikembe in a way that both tracks sound like the culmination of both careers.
I don't hear none of you, I'm in front of you, my lyrics trouble you, think in front of you, how did I did that? You don't want to.
Okay, now going to the first one, this thing is great. Like, some of the highlights are just incredible. For example, God Made You a Monster. This song is a masterpiece, and I don't think I've heard anything else similar to this. At first, it starts off as a pop rap sounding song, the progression of which sounds like a carousel. Ain't got no joy today. What's your cut day? It reminds me of Blade's Love Story, but with a beat made out of reversed sounds. Then it transitions to a schizo episode sounding thing, and finally finishes off with a, by now usual for Edward, eerie sounding beat. In this part, Ed also calls back to X, telling him to rest in peace. The song switches up 3 times during its span and leaves you thinking, what the fuck have I just heard? In the best way imaginable, of course. Then we have Drug Story. Tell me this doesn't sound like Yabujin.
DJ Street Blaze, smoke something. You fuck.
Once again, I don't know whose Edward's producers are, but they are insane. First, they injected the song with Rudiger Arrow. This is the only proper way I can describe the instrumentals. Second, they added quotes from GTA 4 all across the song, alongside the sounds of water drops, and then all of it is polished by Edward singing, making a very interesting track, which I think also became one of the fan favorites. Then, Edward also decided to make a track that sounds like violence. Drug Dealer Injects His Fentanyl is probably one of the most aggressive and psychotic songs he's ever made. Edward sounds like he has rabies or he's actually having a psychosis, and the beat is made out of God knows what. I honestly cannot identify the sounds on this song, which is kinda true for all of the songs on the album, but especially this one. And the fact that I cannot identify what is going on just shows how out of the box the producers of the album are. Because honestly, how do you make a mixture of schizophrenic sounds not just into a beat, but into a song which is also very enjoyable? Listening to my rant about schizo-sounding music, you may say, but if it's a schizo episode, why does it work? And I think there are different levels to this. First, it's unusual. Oftentimes with such experimental artists, we forgive them for different imperfections because of the idea and the creativity of it. Like yeah, Blade's vocals on Glue are the furthest thing away from perfect, but we still listen to them and enjoy them because they are so distinct and authentic and help artists' respective creative styles and directions work. That's why the weirdness and the chaos of the songs works for Edward, and that leads me to the second point. Edward's beat selection. I think it is important to recognize that whilst the songwriting is extremely unordinary, it is not like that for the sake of being unordinary. This crazy direction of Edward is only present when it works, and the fact that Edward can identify that sometimes it is better to step away from the style he's usually in and take a different approach just benefits the album more. Tracks like Drug Story or even Skeletrix Island show that, as both tracks are distinct from the rest of the album's style. And while being far from sounding generic, Drug Story is probably one of the most ordinary songs on the album, as it is actually comparable to other music. I would say that it is a sort of mixture between Yabuji's Flash Casanova and Memphis rap. I think I'm the first person ever to have Yabujin and Memphis rap in the same sentence, but okay. And Skeletrix Island is a blissful continuation of his series of songs, and it is simply Edward agonizingly singing about how he mentally checked out over a piano. Why is it important? Because I think those two are a reason behind the record's success. The singles like Skeletrix Island, Blurry Picture, and Yo Bro Will Kill You for a Bend all help the record not overwhelm the listener in a sense, as they bring something more usual and expected to the experience. Well, as usual as Edward can get, obviously. And the typical rap song and Skeletrix Island series do a job of expanding Edward's identity even further. Typical rap songs bring back the more simplistic feel to the album to some extent, as typical rap song 11 and 12 are one of the most minimal songs in the projects, with TSR 12 using the same beat as Z06 Get Out, Ed's biggest song.
Z06, I got too much speed.
Skeletrix Island in particular is interesting as it is also a location which Edward heavily promotes everywhere. This is his trademark even outside of music, as during his AI video era, people on the internet have started making a bunch of jokes and videos about the place. It is even the name of the group chat with my boys on Instagram. This creates something similar to Blade's Blade City or Rain World. Such fake places give the authenticity to what the artists are making and help the artists build lore out of it. Also, in this case, it kinda makes sense as he shouted them out on Slave People Still Shop at Neiman's.
Feel like drinking when I'm in Sweden.
Continuing on the reason for which the album works, let's take a look at how Edward and museum music fit into the grand scheme of rap music. And to do that, I think we can look at yet another character. We all know Ned Spin, the white boy who went from being hated on by everybody tapped in with the underground to becoming probably the face of the underground himself. Blowing up in 2024, Ned began gaining recognition at the end of 2023, with him being mentioned on the New York Times podcast and articles as the future of rap and a post-rage artist, which I find to be a very precise description of what made Ned Spin interesting. But what does post-rage really mean? The prefix post does not have a distinct and strictly set definition behind it, but I think there is a way of characterizing what is meant by that. I see it as stripping rage, a subgenre of trap, to its most primal and core elements. In a sense, it is a minimalistic approach to rage music, which is predominantly known by its raw sounds, playful beats, and heavy 808s, and its simplistic drum patterns, of course. I never thought of that while listening to Ned Spin until I heard this comparison. However, now it makes total sense. Think of Ned's popular pre-Badass Fucking Kid era songs: Drank, We Not Like You, 40, What They Say, and even Nothing Like You to some extent.
Bitch, I'm in a bitch, I go. Yeah, I miss my brother, that's for sure. I speak cause he took this to the end. Bitch, I'm bust on my favors because I make more than they spend. Said I'm in the club alone. Give a fuck with what they say, so I'm clutching on one pole. I ain't discreet when I walk in the building. Bitch, I got my tech. I told Vivid, roll that 70-30.
All of these songs are extremely minimal in both their form and sound. They're mostly under 2 minutes long, they have very simplistic 808 and drum patterns, little progression and vocal processing, and yet it works. Yes, Ned has stepped away from such a minimal approach in the last few months, however, he is just an example. Many other hip-hop artists in the underground have and still are doing music in that style, showing that this is in a sense a trend. But I don't necessarily think that post-rage is just a trend. I think it is a deformation and expansion of the genre. This is where Ed's museum music comes in. While there is a variety of artists pursuing a minimalistic approach, I'd say that the general trend of the underground rage music is not necessarily to be minimalistic, but rather to bend and expand the limits of the genre, and Edward is no exception. Unlike Ned and his post-rage, I'd call Edward's style art rage, which is not the exact opposite, but rather a different direction. Once again, art whatever in a genre is a very broad term, but usually it describes a direction which, unlike post-genres, don't strip the genre to its minimal form, but rather take it to the other extreme, exaggerating other musical elements of the genre and adding different layers, features, and instruments, thus expanding the genre's boundaries. It is pretty clear that Edward does exactly that. Take a song like Plastic Body, which is by far my favorite of museum music. It starts off with Edward's simple singing, mixed with his usual beat, this time with a piano in its score. But then the emotional singing about drug-related issues progresses with the beat, and leads to one of the craziest beat drops ever, which sounds like the earth is literally crushing, making the emotional weight of the song even stronger.
I need to fucking learn how to
The song adds layers upon layers on itself, making it an example of something I want to call art rage. And Edward does it all the time. He loves adding layers and unique features to his songs. He utilizes tools unusual not only for rage, but for any type of music in his songs. For example, most of his beats utilize reverse sounds. Some of the tracks use organic sounds like a cat meowing on typical rap song 12, or the sounds of the audience as if museum music is a sitcom and not an album. Songs like Slave People Still Shop at Neiman's use such insane synths that they sound like mathematical functions transformed into sounds. This makes songs sound so electronic and artificial, yet very alluring due to their authenticity. And unlike Ned's minimalist approach, where songs were really short, Edward is not scared of making almost 5-minute long songs. Edward has been doing it even before museum music, and I think this art rage direction has already inspired others to make something similar. Of course, Brendan Jones is one of those people who he works with, so it is a little different. However, I believe that even Ned Spin, who is obviously not known for this direction, took inspo from Edward. Take a listen to Shut Up from Badass Fucking Kid. You can't convince me that its beat doesn't sound like something Edward would do. What that means is that we have possibly witnessed the release of a genre-creating album. Museum music takes the crazy multi-layered chaotic approach of Edward from the first mixtape and makes it even more distinct and fleshed out, giving us a hope that Edward might become a next big name in the future. All jokes aside though, I think that museum music is a big step not only for Edward, but for rage music in general. This album pushes the genre of art rage even further and could realistically be an inspiration for many. Also, while it is not the most accessible listen, I believe that it is great for music as a whole to have such projects. Experimental music expands your taste and makes you more open-minded and open to innovation, which is definitely what music needs. I definitely enjoyed it and thought this was one of the best projects from the subgenre, and I still bump it to this day. Not only did the exhibition and the album already promote Edward as an artist, they have established him as an art rage avant-gardist, who also doubles down as one of the most creative and bold personas in the industry, and hopefully we will see Edward create even more groundbreaking projects in the future. If you haven't listened to museum music, do yourself a favor and give it a try. Thank you for watching. It was Jenny from Bliss. See y'all next time. I bet you go to me. I want you blessed and what you